talk about local, which we haven't done a lot of talking about throughout the conference, but we have been talking about quite a lot of big topics: big data, social media, cross-platform, mobile, lots of big topics. And right now what we want to do is bring out a great panel of experts that can help you think about those topics in the context of local. And I don't want to take up too much of their time, so I'm just going to introduce them. And you'll pardon me for my glasses here. First on our panel today is Billy McDowell, who is from Raycom. He oversees all the research activities related there at the Raycom-owned television stations. And many of you, if you haven't known, Billy is very active in the research community, both with the CRE and the MRC, and we are very, very excited that he's joining us today. So welcome, Billy McDowell. Also joining us is Maribeth Papuga, who is the Executive Vice President, Director of Local Video Investment and Activation at MediaVest. Maribeth is a bit of a transplant. She began her career out in LA, and she was a Media Week All-Star for Spot Television back in 1999. And so welcome, Maribeth. And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to invite Brian McElroy to join us. Brian is representing radio since he works with Katz, Katz Radio Group, and has been there since 2009. He's the Senior VP of Research there on the radio front and is a 20-year research veteran in our industry. So I think you'll agree we have a great panel of experts that really can help us get through all of the issues we have of the day. And I'm going to step over here in the empty seat and say thank you and welcome to the three of you.
Thank you.
So we've got 30 minutes on the clock to address all things local and all things measurement. And we've done a little bit of talking about this as we were getting ready to come out and speak with you this week. And my first question for each of you is, why local? Right? We hear a lot about all of the issues in measurement. Most of them are talked about on the national scale. But really, when you think about local, it's not just a microcosm of the national stage. It is very unique, and probably differentiation is the word that we want to think about when we talk about local. And so as I was thinking about this for each of you, I thought maybe you could tell us in your own experience how you see local being differentiated from national, and whether or not we have the tools in place to really get at what's special about that. You want to start?
I think the client should go first.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I think from an advertiser perspective, one of the sort of missed opportunities for research has been this sense of optimizers and everything that came about in the last probably 15 to 20 years that was really dependent on the national data. And that told us a lot about consumers, but with everything that's been happening in local markets, from the influence of immigration and just the economic house foreclosures, people's mindsets are very different across the US. And I think that short of just the media measurement, I think a way that would really bring more life to local and actually be more impactful for marketers if we could tie both together. So really a lot about the human impact on people and their mindset, as well as what the media impact is. And I think that that's what's really missing. And we tend to just relate everything back to a national comparison of, is it a cheaper CPM? And am I reaching enough people to be mindful of that? So I think that that's really where research, if they could tie both together, maybe that science and social would actually help in all of the channels that are actually integrating local markets now.
Wow. What about on the radio front?
Well, yeah, so yesterday morning was very enlightening. The new CEO of the ARF actually spoke to us, Gail, and she talked about being a girl from Minnesota who's coming to New York and learning how to adapt to city life. And as she was explaining that, I was thinking to myself, wait a minute. We have too much New Yorkitis here. We think like New Yorkers, and maybe we should be thinking more like Minnesota. So rather, it's maybe looking at things on a national level, but we can't be looking at things strictly on a New York level because New York is not like Minnesota or Billy, you're from Alabama. So those are completely different parts of the country. And something that, I always, from a radio point of view, the most listened to radio format in the United States is country music. And if you're from Los Angeles or from Miami or from New York, you would have no clue that's the case. But the tastes of those of us that work and live in New York and make a lot of media decisions aren't necessarily that reflective of the rest of the country. So it's just putting things in context.
I agree with you. In fact, we at the TVB, where I am now, we talk about this a lot. And it's interesting because because you work in a big market like New York or LA, and we talk to a lot of media buyers and clients and whatnot, it's very difficult to get folks who are born and bred in big cities to understand the power of local and local connection, because our national media is our local media at the same time. So we don't really see that differentiation in the same way that folks who live in other markets do. Would you agree, Billy?
Yeah, and I'm the guy on the panel that moved from New York to Alabama. And I always say that if you ever seen my cousin Vinny, I'm living that. And that's so it's a different mindset in a lot of our markets that we deal with. Raycom deals with a lot of markets across the country, and but we celebrate those unique aspects of the market, and that the local passions and people really underestimate the power of the local stations that we have. The local news is really the driver in terms of how the ratings performance is. The network contributes to that, but the top rated shows during the week are going to be local newscasts, not prime time anymore. That's a change in our industry.
That's true. We do at TVB, we do a ranker every week of the top 100 shows, and typically when we look at the local markets, the national markets, it's all national broadcast with a few cable shows in between, and on the local side, at least 3 to 5 of the top 10 are all the newscasts, and it's probably a function of how many newscasters there are in the market, I would imagine, right?
But I think the one point to make about that too is the impact of news and local anchors and local talent has on a community. I mean, if you look across America, most of these people are real veterans of the community. They participate across lots of different programs and charitable organizations and things like that. So when you're talking about social in a local market, they are an integral part of that social connection. And then when we look at all the tragedies we've had, unfortunately, over the last 2 months, local social connections are usually through the broadcasters at a start. At least, isn't that true?
Absolutely. And we've seen that, and I did a special study after the big tornadoes in Alabama 2 years ago, and it was, people were connected to the weather. They were tracking the storms through their local stations. If they weren't on their local stations, they were on radio, the simulcast of our TV stations, or they were on our websites or social networks that are.
It's true. In fact, there was, I know because we've unfortunately had 2 major tragedies in the last 2 or 3 months between Boston and Oklahoma. And in that process, as we've been looking at different data points, we've seen that we are talking about social and digital and whatnot in our panel, but we've seen that traffic to the television station websites and their social sites, the inbound traffic from outside the market is exponential. And I found it very interesting that people who don't live in Boston, who don't live in Oklahoma, found the local media and attached themselves to the digital streams of those local media. And I, in fact, have started to do that myself. So now on my phone, I have an app in Ohio, and I have an app. Every time I go somewhere, I want to make sure I'm up to date on whether there's a tornado coming my way. So approximately every 20 minutes, I get a news alert from someplace in the United States. And I usually say, to my husband, oh, by the way, there was a train wreck at such and such place, very near your house where you grew up. Back in Ohio, something like that.
So really what you're saying is that from a digital point of view, living in a market is no longer a prerequisite for consuming content in that market. So it's this thing of, I know there's definitely some Boston Red Sox fans here or New England Patriots. We know for a fact that they all migrate to radio stations digitally that are in Boston to get their fix of New England Boston sports news. So it's almost like we used to think of local or spot as having these borders, but those borders are becoming a little bit blurred with digital consumption. So we live in interesting times. So.
All the more reason that we have better measurement to get at all of that, which leads me to my next question for all of you, which is, so much of, I've moved from the national marketplace to the local marketplace recently. And, what I found is that there is, let's just say, a healthy amount of conversation around the currency, the very basic currencies of local measurement and local markets. And at the same time, concurrently, so much conversation on the national stage about cross-platform measurement, about social measurement, about digital measurement, mobile measurement. So my question for you, having been more veterans on the local side than I have been, is that if you feel as though this sort of perpetual tinkering with the local currency has precluded us in some way from focusing on what the next kind of measurement or what's going to drive local forward, and if so, how can the local media industry leapfrog over that currency conversation and get to a place where we're leading the way for new methods instead of trying to catch up?
So I'll start, I think. I think one of the things that we were talking about this before the session started, is we can't get around ourselves in the industry. I think that everybody is still looking backwards or today. How is this going to impact my sales today, my ability to sell product, my ability to measure and, and sort of just confirm that I did the right thing. So we are very dependent on, from an advertiser perspective, the market mix models, which tend to skew towards television and probably more on a national level. But at the local level, it's also hard because a broadcaster or traditional, media type that's in the market feels that they're under-measured. And so people will tend to just, if someone in the current methodology says, well, here's what we think we need to do to move everything forward, it's sort of like we want to see the impact of that, we want to measure it, we want to know what's going on. Well, this is 4 years down the road, and you'll still be measuring the same thing. Meanwhile, the world has changed exponentially. So I think it's us all jumping off the cliff together would be the best thing to do. Okay. Like you said, blow it all up. We have to take a chance. And I think instead of always feeling like we're on the defense and trying to defend the audiences that we're actually reaching locally, let's find a way to actually demonstrate that this is a valuable commodity of audience that we need to tap into. We may not get the currency right, but we got to be there. And so if we can take a leap of faith to say we're in the right place and we're measuring them correctly, that will come now that big data is available. I mean, there are other sources of opportunity. I don't have the answer, but I think that everyone collectively, your side, yep. Definitely.
Okay, so maybe as a buyer, you're more willing to jump off the bridge, but if you're a seller, what do you think, Billy? Were you willing to
one of the initiatives that I'm involved in is through the Council for Research Excellence, and I'm active on the local measurement committee, and we're currently working on a white paper that talks about the diary and diary measurement. And we think we still need in-market measurement. It's very important to point out the uniqueness of that market. But the way that we handle the diary, the expectations from a statistical point of view far exceed the diary's capability right now. So we need to find out those boundaries statistically of what the diary really does offer us, and kind of help shepherd local market buying, because the diary is going to be with us for quite a while in some of these smaller markets. So.
I mean, from the radio point of view, talking about currency actually makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And that's because I don't know if those are the types of research dialogues we should be having about talking to advertisers with. So we talk about measuring the unmeasured, but what about the measurement of actual campaign objectives? Did the people the advertisers that invested a lot of money in these local markets, did it move the needle? Did it meet their marketing objectives? So I almost think sometimes if we focus so much on currency, on measuring the number of ears and eyeballs, we actually might be losing sight of what we should be measuring, which is, did the needle move for these clients? And so I almost think that's maybe where it should be put more of the focus.
Are there any resources that you know of in the marketplace that are trying to address whether or not we're moving needles for clients on the local side?
Okay.
Well, the answer is yes. It's happening. Katz has made a partnership with Ipsos where we're actually measuring the campaigns of local marketers, Clear Channel's moving ahead with doing, a lot of the radio companies are doing things. But I would say it costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of commitment. And trying to measure the impact of a movie campaign versus a QSR versus a bank, those are completely different categories. It requires some flexibility to be able to measure the results of their campaign. So it's easier said than done, but it can be done.
I think what's scalable is really where it is, and that's the dilemma that advertisers have when they're investing in local versus national, is what's the scale play and how do I actually know for a fact and can report back to my procurement that I got what I paid for. And so if you hire a third-party auditor, they tend to resort back to, you know, the methodology that exists today or existed 5 years ago and impart their own subjective opinion on what's right or wrong, in which case that then feeds into either be an index against sales to say, was it worth it? So I think there's two things. One is, do we improve the currency, but do we also improve the ROI on how we measure local? Do we need to peel the onion back a little bit more than just saying it's a straight, here's what I have nationally, you have to match that locally. And I think some of the more forward-thinking advertisers are starting to understand that because they see a result. They just can't quantify back to their procurement or their finance people that this is worth the investment long term. And that's the dilemma. If you can have measurement and data that can support that, and that's actually a digital dilemma right now too, is how do you support the ROI and what your ad serving costs are and all of that.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, it's been a difficult conversation because the thing that's not in the equation is the creative. And you can have a campaign reach a lot of people if it's not great creative or whatever, it's not going to move the needle. And so I think it's becoming better now with the digital products that we have because you can extend a whole campaign. And I heard someone mention today a partnership. You know, so if we can get more in line with a partnership instead of just selling spot and work on our websites, working on social media, work on mobile, working on this, all the assets together and do a comprehensive campaign, then, you know, that we can see the effects of that much more readily.
And that's what's missing is that additive, right? It's not an either or. It's not, I do national television, I do some digital overlays locally, and that's my local to national, you know, advancement. I think there's opportunities that we might be missing and we're not able to share the value of the station with the creative and how the content placement might actually be delivering differently locally because we're talking to the local tastes as well and the local cultures. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know it's a big ask.
Let's act for as much as we can. We're all out here, right? You're all gonna help us. Keep asking because as we said, we don't want to continue to have the same conversation over and over again. If we don't ask, we won't get there, and we should be asking. And I'm glad that you brought up the creative, because we actually do have, gasp, some local creative that we want to share. And I want to ask the technical folks if they can cue that up for you and give you a little taste of what can be done in terms of tailoring things locally. And the reason why I bring that up is because we have this conversation about ethnic audiences all the time, right? In order to really talk to the Hispanic audience, you need to speak in their language, you need to understand what they care about. Why should it be any different when we talk about a local market versus a national audience? And so I'll ask my panelists and the audience to ponder that as we play some creative here for you now.
Today, my journey to help save people money on car insurance brings me to San Francisco, where I can't wait to walk up and down the city's 48 hills, spreading my message of Geico's savings. There's only one problem with that plan. It works great going down the hills, but coming up, I can barely catch my breath. Much less talk about how much you could save by switching to Geico. Oh, stop that trolley, will you?
For a free rate quote, visit geico.com to see how much you could save. Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Today, my journey to help save people money on car insurance brings me to New York, the city that never sleeps. Which is great, because Geico's here to help you 24/7, online or over the phone. It's sort of like the car insurance company that never sleeps. Although, don't try getting them to deliver you a pepperoni pizza at 4 a.m. That is where they draw the line.
For a free rate quote, visit geico.com to see how much you could save. Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Today, my journey to help save people money on car insurance brings me to the Windy City, which is a bit scary considering I don't weigh much more than a leaf. It is pretty windy, but that's not going to stop me from helping people save money on car insurance. Actually, it would be nice if someone could stop me. I'm blowing down Michigan Avenue, and I seem to be gathering speed.
To get a free rate quote, go to geico.com, then buy online, over the phone, or at your local Geico office. Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Here's the vegetables. Oh, that's it. That is it. Here's...
Turkey, trimmings, televisions. Everything you need for Thanksgiving. Meijer. Higher standards, lower prices.
So, first couple of radio spots really dealing with something that was very specific to a local market, and then the Meijer spot, which I love as a TV spot because I think the prevailing perception is that local creative isn't all that creative. And when I first saw that spot, I thought, this is fantastic. I wouldn't know that this was a local spot versus a national spot in terms of quality. But the question remains, are there tools that exist that help us to differentiate and to be able to say, look, it makes a difference when we tailor messaging and market versus national?
Test and learn, test and learn. I mean, we actually, Katz actually tested that Geico campaign, interviewed people in San Francisco, in Chicago, and in New York, and actually asked them what they thought about those ads. They thought they were witty, charming, and more importantly, they were relevant. And they appreciated the fact that a national advertiser was trying to speak to them, just talking about what makes their community unique. So, you know, I almost think of it this way, is rather than thinking of local uniqueness as being an obstacle for creative folks, why can't it be used as inspiration for doing some really cool things? So anyway, it always makes me smile whenever I see an advertiser really try to speak to consumers or citizens directly in those markets.
I think it comes down to the creative brief too, because one of the challenges with local in general and with radio has been that it's been very difficult for advertisers to shift from a TV brief to a radio brief and really use radio from a formatting perspective even say country different from, adult-oriented rock. But I think from a local perspective, understanding the brief of how somebody in New York might look at the ad versus somebody in California or Alabama, having that lens, and people do try it through tagging or they try it through, Walmart's out there doing individual grocery comparisons now in local market where they get local talent and they're having a really good result from that. And I think that that's a real application that they're saying a national chain is trying to localize their message. Obviously the testing isn't necessarily as predictive because until you do the spot and you actually have a message that resonates with the consumer, I think you can test all you want, and it's really going to be the local tastes and the behaviors. And I think that's where research, there's an opportunity. I think that's the point, to bring in the local environment, and how does that overlay into what we're actually trying to do from a media perspective. Mm-hmm. I mean, you test news, right?
Right.
So
in every single market we do that. So.
Right, so maybe there's test capabilities in that format that could be applied to some of the local advertising.
Well, one of the things that I think advertisers have told us enough is they need help targeting their customers, and we really take that seriously. Our company is really into qualitative research, and so we do subscribe to a lot of qualitative research at our stations that try to tell the story of the uniqueness of that market. So they're trying to use that research, obviously to steer the buy toward us, but to help the buyer understand more completely about the market. And that includes things like Scarborough or Marshall Marketing or even RenTrack, all the qualitative aspects of that. We try to take advantage of those things so that we can help. Sometimes it's met with real appreciation, and sometimes it's just discarded outright. But I think the more that we can help our agencies and advertisers understand the market, the better we are. So.
Absolutely. It sounds to me like there's not a lot of plug and play options here from a research perspective. There's a lot of custom qualitative that we're engaging in to sort of fill the gap. But we could obviously benefit from someone, a vendor maybe out there, who could think about some plug and play options for a local. Which brings me to my last question, which is terrific conference. I personally think over the last 2 days, Gail, you and the team have done a terrific job. Great case studies from marketers, great first-person stories from researchers, and honestly, I think one of the best conferences that are out there today in terms of what we actually get to learn and can do. And from that perspective, I know there's a lot of things that I want to go out and pursue. I'm wondering if, from what you were able to see over the last 2 days here and there, was there something that resonated with you that you feel like, God, I wish I could translate that to local, or God, that'll really work for us?
We're really fortunate. The fact that one of the largest advertisers in the history of mankind, AT&T, actually let us peek under their hood and see what they're doing, that's a really, we're really fortunate to see that happen. So, you know, when they're showing how they're looking at television through cable or TV or sponsorship lens, I keep thinking to myself, well, do they have enough data to go down to more different levels? Are there differences by market, and are they looking at it that way? And anyway, so I think I have to keep pinching myself that we're really fortunate to be able to at least have a major advertiser give us a little peek at what they're doing and how they think. So.
Agreed. Agreed.
And I think the biggest learning is really that we tend to still live in our comfort zone. We live in, you know, what we did, what we feel is historically the direction that we need to go. But meanwhile, the devices are changing rapidly. People's consumption is changing rapidly, which means you're probably going to have more fragmentation than less across channels and even within a siloed device. So I think looking forward and saying we need to actually make some new rules of engagement as opposed to constantly sticking to our old research thoughts. You know, would a little risk-taking actually help us get there and affirmatively tell the industry this is where we need to go, not have a debate where people talk about it for 5 years and then nothing gets done. So I know we're all guilty of that, and there's people with great ideas, but I think perhaps if some of the larger operations within the Research of Excellence Council could get together and move forward, it might help.
Right.
Well said.
I think for me, it really opens up your eyes to how much attention is being paid to some of the cross-platform type issues and stuff, and we're involved in all those cross-platform things. So it's real learning on my behalf. I think the one thing that really hit me was Dwayne's presentation this morning on innovation labs, and I just really, I don't know if he's here today, but I appreciate that very much because we have kind of been doing that on an ad hoc basis. I'll do a special study, you know, with the University of Alabama doing something for Gen Y. I'll do something, you know, with another university or something, but I think we need to formalize that process on innovation, and I got a lot out of that seminar. So.
That's fantastic. Well, listen, I think we are in right on time and under the wire. I want to thank each of you for taking the time and helping us think about local. It doesn't always get a lot of time on the agenda, but I think it's a really very important topic for all of us because we are in a country, but we live in our communities, and that's where we buy our stuff. So thank you all, and on to the last session of the conference.
Okay, thank you.